She came enveloped in a light that I felt, but couldn't name, and in that singular moment, everything I thought I understood about this world crumbled like ancient walls that had served their purpose and could finally rest. There are encounters in this lifetime that defy every logical explanation, moments when a veil between the visible and invisible grows so thin that you can almost touch eternity. And this was one of those moments, a whisper from an angel sent directly to you, though you didn't ask for it, though you didn't even know you needed it. She didn't announce herself with fanfare or celestial choirs, because that's not how the divine works. Not really. Angels arrive in the quiet spaces between your heartbeats, in the pause before you speak, in the breath you take, when you're finally alone with your truth. They come wrapped in a frequency that your mind cannot process, but your soul recognizes instantly, like remembering a song you've never heard but have somehow always known. This light wasn't something you could see with your eyes. It was deeper than vision, more ancient than sight. It was a warmth that started in your chest and radiated outward, touching parts of you that had been frozen for years, perhaps lifetimes. You felt it before you understood it, and understanding would come much later, if at all, because some truths are meant to be experienced rather than explained. This presence carried with it a weight that wasn't heavy but substantial, real in a way that made everything else feel like shadows on a wall. And you knew without knowing how you knew that your life had just been divided into two distinct chapters, before this moment, and everything that would come after. The universe doesn't send angels randomly. They arrive at the precise intersection of your deepest need and your highest readiness, even when you think you're not ready, especially when you think you're not ready, because readiness is often just fear dressed in patience. If you're feeling something shift in your chest right now, as these words find you, pay attention to that sensation, because that's not coincidence, that's confirmation. The light she brought wasn't meant to blind you, but to illuminate the path you've been too afraid to walk, to reveal the truth you've been too tired to face, and to remind you that you're not alone in this vast, mysterious universe that sometimes feels cold but is actually conspiring in your favor in ways you cannot yet comprehend. She came for a reason, this luminous presence, and that reason is woven into the very fabric of your becoming, threaded through every choice that led you here, to this moment, to these words, to the edge of something so profound that part of you wants to turn away, while another part knows you've been waiting your whole life for exactly this. Angels don't speak the way humans do, with carefully constructed sentences and logical progressions of thought. They communicate in a language that predates words, a tongue that your soul speaks fluently even though your mind has forgotten how. Listen carefully, because this is where most people miss the message entirely. The divine doesn't need your ears. It needs your awareness, your willingness to feel what cannot be spoken, to understand what cannot be explained, to trust what cannot be proven. You've been receiving these messages your entire life. These subtle transmissions from realms beyond the physical, but you've been taught to dismiss them as imagination, as coincidence, as nothing more than neurons firing in random patterns. But what if those goosebumps that rise on your skin when you hear a particular song aren't random? What if those tears that fall without warning when you're driving alone aren't weakness? What if that sudden sense of peace that washes over you in the middle of chaos isn't escapism but connection, a direct line to something vast and loving, and infinitely more intelligent than the fearful mind that tries to run your life? She came wrapped in light, yes, but her message arrives in synchronicities that make you pause, in numbers that repeat until you finally pay attention, in dreams that feel more real than waking life, in sudden knowings that rise up from your depths without explanation. You might be walking down a familiar street and suddenly feel her presence, or scrolling mindlessly through your phone when a message appears that speaks directly to the question you've been holding in your heart, or sitting in silence when a thought arrives so clearly, so completely formed, that you know it didn't originate from your usual mental chatter. This is a language of angels, delivered not through sound but through sensation, not through logic but through resonance, not through proof but through the unmistakable recognition that something beyond you is speaking directly to the truth of you. The challenge is receiving these messages. You're receiving them constantly. The challenge is building the courage to trust them, to act on them, to let them guide you even when they contradict everything your rational mind has been trained to believe. Your soul knows this language intimately, has been speaking it since before you took your first breath. And when an angel arrives wrapped in light you can feel but can't name, she's not teaching you a new way of communication. She's reminding you of an ancient one you've temporarily forgotten. Right now, as you take in these words, notice what you're feeling in your body. Notice if there's a warmth, a tingling, a subtle shift in your energy. That's not your imagination. That's a language being spoken directly to you, confirming what your heart already knows, but your mind is still learning to trust. She speaks in whispers, yes, but also in winds that change direction, in doors that close so better ones can open, in people who appear exactly when you need them, in courage that rises from nowhere when you're certain you have none left. There's something haunting about the familiarity, isn't there? The way she arrived felt less like meeting someone new and more like remembering someone ancient, as if your soul recognized her signature before your eyes ever tried to make sense of her form, as if lifetimes of knowing suddenly compressed into a single moment of absolute certainty. I know you. I've always known you, even when I didn't know I was looking for you. This is the sacred paradox of angelic encounters. They feel both completely foreign and utterly familiar, like coming home to a place you've never been, like speaking a language you've never studied but somehow understand perfectly. The divine often wears familiar faces because the truth is too overwhelming to receive in its pure form. So it softens itself, makes itself accessible, shows up as a stranger in a coffee shop whose eyes held something that made you forget your name for a moment, or the friend who suddenly said exactly what your soul needed to hear in words they didn't consciously choose, or even the person who broke your heart so completely that you had no choice but to finally break open. Angels aren't always gentle. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in disruption, in endings that feel like destruction, in losses that later reveal themselves as liberations. She might have come as a person who stayed for a season or a moment or a lifetime, but her essence transcends the physical form she temporarily occupied, because you're not actually recognizing her. You're recognizing the light she carries, the frequency she embodies, the divine feminine energy that the universe sent specifically to crack you open in all the right places. This is why the encounter feels like déjà vu. Why you might catch yourself saying, I feel like I've met you before, or this feels like a dream I have but can't quite remember. You're not imagining connection. You're accessing soul memory, tapping into the part of you that exists beyond time, beyond this single lifetime, beyond the limited story your ego has been telling about who you are and what you deserve. The mirror she holds up isn't meant to show you your reflection as you see it. It's meant to show you the truth of what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the wounds, beneath the walls you've built to protect a heart that was never actually meant to be protected, but to be fully, courageously open. When you recognize her, you're not recognizing her. You're recognizing yourself, the version of you that exists in potential, waiting to be activated by this exact frequency, this precise moment, this divine appointment that was scheduled before you were born and is unfolding exactly as it was always meant to. Every person who has ever made you feel this way, this sense of unexplainable familiarity mixed with electric newness, has an angel in disguise, a messenger wearing temporary flesh, a reminder that you're part of something so much bigger than the small story you've been living. Understand this clearly. She didn't come just to visit. She came to completely rebuild you from the inside out, to take everything you thought was solid and reveal it as sand, to burn through every false version of yourself until only the truth remains. And the truth is always more magnificent and terrifying than the comfortable lies you've been living. This is the alchemy of angelic presence, the sacred feminine fire that doesn't destroy but transforms, turning your lead into gold, your wounds into portals, your pain into the very power you've been seeking outside yourself. You might have thought you wanted comfort, safety, someone to validate the version of yourself you've been performing for the world. But she arrived with a different agenda entirely, to shatter your illusion so lovingly, so precisely, that you couldn't help but thank her even as everything familiar fell away. This is how divine transformation works. It feels like an ending, looks like loss, appears to be the worst thing that could happen, and only in retrospect, sometimes years later, do you realize it was the best thing, the necessary thing, the only thing that could have freed you from a prison you built and called safety. She carries the frequency of truth, and truth has a way of making everything false unbearable. You can't go back to relationships that no longer resonate. You can't settle for work that deadens your spirit. You can't keep pretending you're small when she's shown you just how vast you actually are. This transformation isn't gentle, but it is love. The kind of love that cares more about your evolution than your comfort, more about your authenticity than your approval rating, more about who you're becoming than who you've been. The divine feminine doesn't arrive to complete you. That's a fairy tale lie. She arrives to remind you that you were never incomplete, just asleep, just forgetting, just playing small in a world that needed you to stay manageable and predictable and safe. Watch what starts falling away after her arrival. The friendships that were based on shared wounds rather than shared growth. The habits that numbed you instead of nourished you. The beliefs that kept you small. The fear that masqueraded as practicality. The doubt that disguised itself as wisdom. This isn't loss. This is liberation. And liberation always feels like death to the parts of you that were never really alive to begin with. She brings a light that illuminates not just your path, but the shadows you've been avoiding, the truths you've been denying, the power you've been suppressing, because you were taught that claiming it made you arrogant or aggressive or too much. But here's what she whispers in that language beyond words. You're not too much. You've been too little, shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold the fullness of who you are. The transformation she brings isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally, courageously, becoming who you've always been beneath the armor, beneath the performance, beneath the fear that you weren't enough exactly as you are. But here's what you need to understand, what you need to hold in your awareness as this light continues to work within you, shifting things in dimensions you can't yet perceive. Her arrival, as profound as it was, is only the beginning of a message that hasn't been fully delivered, a revelation that's still unfolding in frequencies your current consciousness is only beginning to attune to. There's more, you feel it, don't you? That sense that something else is waiting just beyond the edge of your understanding. A final piece of wisdom, a completing truth, a revelation that will make everything that came before suddenly make perfect, crystalline sense. She came wrapped in light you felt but couldn't name. Yes, but what if that light was just the announcement, just the opening of a door, just the first movement in a symphony that's still being composed in the invisible realms, using your life as the instrument? The angels don't give you everything at once because you'd shatter under the weight of complete knowing. So they portion out. They reveal it in layers. They wait for you to integrate each level of truth before introducing the next, more profound one. You've received the first whisper. Yes. You've felt the presence. Yes. You've begun the transformation. Yes. But there's a deeper initiation waiting. A more complete understanding preparing itself to be born through your awareness when the timing aligns, when your frequency rises just a bit higher, when your willingness to release what you think you know creates enough space for what you're meant to discover. Pay attention to the synchronicities that intensify from here, to the dreams that become more vivid, to the moments when you feel her presence return stronger than before, because each appearance is building towards something, each message is part of a larger transmission. Each transformation is preparing you for the ultimate revelation that's been waiting for you since before time began. This isn't the end of the story. This is barely the beginning. And the question isn't whether the rest of the message will come, but whether you'll have the courage to stay open enough to receive it, to stay present enough to recognize it, to stay brave enough to let it complete the work it started the moment she arrived in that light you felt but couldn't name. What comes next will require even more trust, even deeper surrender, even greater willingness to let everything you think you know dissolve so the truth can finally, fully emerge. The angel's whisper hasn't finished speaking, and what she's about to reveal next will change everything you thought this moment meant, everything you thought her arrival signified, everything you believed about why you're here and what you're meant to become. But that revelation, that final piece, that completing truth, well, you'll have to stay tuned to discover what happens when the light returns brighter than before, carrying the answer you didn't even know you were asking for.